Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I said I'd do a Cattleya update today. It is going to be a quick one though, because I got a lot of catching up to do. So without further ado, as they say, first of all, the little mounted ones. The blooms are going on this one now, probably only a day left, maybe two, but latest new growth is just starting. This is the little lemon drops crossed with Encyclia vetulina. It's doing okay. It's bloomed on successive new growths and it's now starting a new one, so I see no reason why it shouldn't do it again. This is a little piece of the BC Mackay that broke off when I repotted it. This is sort of growing. I mean, that's a piece for somebody else at some point down the line. I don't plan on keeping it. I have a big pot full. This one is not doing at all well. Reasons unknown. This is the one with the complicated name. I'm not even going to try and say that, but it's got Leopoldii in it, which I believe grows to a reasonable size, so irrespective of what it's been crossed with, it's probably destined to be a lot bigger than that, so I would suggest this is a very young plant. It does have a new growth starting, but it's not a happy plant. It just doesn't seem to want to grow very well, this one. Still, we try. And this little one over here, this is Cattleya Mary Chen, that is, or Marie Chen, crossed with Cattleya something or other, Devenii, I think it is. That was his latest new growth up the top with a single leaf. The latest growth it's pushed up, it has twin leaves and it does have a sheath. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to bloom, but it means it's getting closer. Yeah, so those are the small mounts. Now we get on to the bigger ones. Well, this is my Cattleya cernua, was Sophronitis once upon a time. This has grown an awful lot of new roots, and it has pushed out a couple of new growths, one of which bloomed, but the blooms are going over now. I can see signs of some more new growths pushing out in many places, coming up through the middle. One pushed out round this side, that one's got two leaves on, unusual for this. It grows well. It did do a mass blooming last December. To do a mass blooming, it's going to need a hell of a lot more new growth than it's got at the moment. But I can see 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the plant. That one that's gone out to the right obviously now has bloomed. It won't do it again. And this one coming out to the left. So there's not a huge amount of growth going on this at the moment, but the bulbs mature quickly, so it's got plenty of time to produce more growth before it gets to its blooming season. But coming on, nice little plant. Right, getting on to the biggies now. This is my Brassivola Little Stars. I've lost count of the number of new growths on here, and as a consequence it's produced a brand new root system, perfectly adequate for the size of the plant, which replaces what was quite a poor root system. Let's have a go then. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, probably 9 or 10 new growths, something like that. And they should all bloom at some point down the line. Not too long after they mature, I don't think. It may be one of those that needs the slight cooling down process in the autumn to push the spikes out, but it should bloom. It's a nice, strong, healthy plant now. The new growths are far larger than previous growths, you know, sticking right up the top there now. Little signs of purple on it, you know, little tinges, yeah, okay. That just basically means it's getting the right sort of light to get it to bloom. So coming on nicely, that one. It's another one of the larger Cattleyas mounted. Older part of the plant starting to look a bit tatty now. This is a single rhizome pushing out in one direction only. This is a prime candidate for actually chopping the rhizome and trying to get another lead to push out. I'm not going to do it yet, but I'll wait till it gets another bulb or two. But this was the last new growth that it pushed up, which was similar to before, a little fatter as a bulb but similar sized leaf. This is the latest growth that it's pushed up. That is a much larger leaf, and we do have a sheath down in there. There's no sign of bud yet, but like I say, you know, when you get a plant that's progressing and then a sheath is produced, it's getting to blooming size. Now it could be a blind sheath, and the next one may produce the buds. But again, this has produced a hell of a root system, and the growing season's not over yet. You know, there's still active root tips pushing on, and this one's seemed to have started branching in places as well. So instead of having big long extensions, there's some branching going on, which means there's more roots attaching, which always makes the plant seem happier. And this is Genmanii variety Cattleya. So you know, that with a name like Cattleya, it's going to have a heading towards blue tinge to it, at least. That's what that basically means. It indicates blue, but there are very few true blue orchids. But you know, it just means a sort of lilac-y, purpley, bluey colour, you know. Anyway, coming on, as I say, the older part of the plant's looking a bit tatty now. It's going to drop its oldest leaf or two in the not too distant future. But since it's been mounted, it's grown on pretty well. That's actually one of the big box junior plants, which was some additional plants that Beatrix sent me. So coming on, and possibility of some buds, if not next time, I suspect. Right, now I'm on to the potted ones, holey clay pot ones. I'll be doing them in little groups. As I say, I have got an awful lot of catching up to do, so I can't spend too much time on each plant. This is Tenebrosa. This is another one of the big box juniors. It's variety Aurea. Not quite sure what that word means. I know in the back of my mind, but it's not going to come out at the moment. It's early in the day. This one's had a poor root system. It's going to grow big. That's why it's in a pot that looks far too large for it. But when it's in a holey clay pot with large bark, the size of the pot doesn't matter so much, because it's going to dry fast either way. Doesn't matter how much media is in there. It pushed up this lead, which is not a good one. But it has started a lead in that direction, and it's just starting another growth here. So we're going to have two leads on that, and it has produced some much better roots. Not too many, but they're good roots, you know, nice active growing tips. So that one's coming on. That's got to grow a lot bigger before that gets to blooming size, I feel. Now this one, this is the one that did the funny thing with the big long name. This is Shinfong Little Sun Young Min Golden Boy. Name about 8 foot long. And this pushed up these funny two little growths around the back of the plant that did actually bloom poorly. But I wasn't expecting any growth in this area. We do have a new growth from the same area now, so hopefully that one will grow to full size. And then round the other side, this one bloomed, then this one bloomed, and we now have a strong new growth coming up from there. And at the moment that's going to get put to one side because I can see quite a few scale on that one. Most of them around the base again as usual, but there's a couple creeping up the stems, and the last thing I want is them getting on the leaves because they leave marks. They can't do too much harm on the stem. I'm not even sure that is scale actually, it might just be... No, I don't think it is. It looked like it, but they're just marks. But there were definitely some around the base, so that one hasn't been watered yet. That's just been sprayed with alcohol to try and deal surface-wise. I mean, that's just an evaporative killer, basically. It dehydrates everything. But it's not a perfect world, just using a spray. I just put alcohol in a little spray, the rubbing alcohol. And it evaporates fast and should kill a lot of bugs, but it's not a guarantee. I'll get on to some proper stuff later. Now, this is the only red one I've got. Siang Yu Red Pearl Red Dragonfly. This did bloom on the last new growth, which was this one up here, largest by far. And it now has another strong new growth coming on. No reason why that won't bloom. And then it's going to be out the pot next time round. And I'm hoping it will go that way. But we'll have to wait and see. A long way off blooming yet, but there's no reason why this latest growth shouldn't bloom, and it's started to replace its root system based on that new growth and the previous ones. There's quite a lot of roots in the pot now. That had a very poor root system when I got it, but it's recovering. It's coming back. Yeah, so with a reasonable root system now, this growth should grow to full size and should then bloom. So that's those three. And this tatty looking object is my Iwanagara apple blossom. This has only ever grown one new growth at a time for me, and as a Cattleya type has very thin roots compared with some of the others, or mine does anyway. This was its last new growth that pushed up 2 leaves and bloomed. One before did the same, one before did the same. So it always pushes up a new growth which blooms, and at the moment it's doing it again. So this is its latest new growth coming on. Yeah, so no reason why that one shouldn't bloom. I might have a go at cutting the rhizome on that and see if I can push an eye. I can't see any live eyes on the back of the plant, but you never know with Cattleyas. If there isn't one there, it will make one. So I might give that a go, but probably let this one finish first and mature and bloom, and then think about doing it. But yeah, not my best looking plant. This oldest leaf can come off soon. That actually got burnt in the sun. So even though it looks like it should fall off, it's actually been like that a long time. So that's that one. This is my rescued Encyclia cordigera, this is, that was on the verge of disaster, lost all of its roots. Just potted wrong. Since it was repotted, it's gone mad with roots. It's pushed up a lot of new growths, various places on the plant. One here, another one starting here, one up the middle there, another one round the outside here. So we've got quite a few new growths coming now. Oh, another one. No, that's an old one. It has bloomed for me before, but it was quite a while ago when it was happy and healthy, and then it just started to go downhill and has never bloomed since. I'd expect some of these new growths to push a spike out. It's got a good root system now. It's a happy plant. It's growing fast and growing well. So we should see some blooms on at least one of these latest growths, I'd hope. If not, it'll probably go mad on the next set. But, you know, again, as usual, wait and see. There's no sign of any sheaths yet, but the growths aren't fully matured yet, so, you know, give it a chance. Right, these are the last 2 in bloom. This is the Harrisoniana. This was the one that bloomed on the last growth that looked incredibly virused. It had a very distorted bloom with quite substantial colour break. A lot of people said bin it and this and the other, but I gave it a chance. It's pushed up another growth larger than previous, which shows vigour, and it did produce 2 blooms. They are just going now. They're starting to get tatty edges, so they are going to go over very soon. And looking at the swelling at the base, I would say the next new growth is thinking about breaking out of the sheath any minute. Not bad roots, not a bad plant, and eventually these tatty bits that hang out the side will be able to be snipped off. This one's going now, which is a shame, but this has got 2 leads. There's another lead. Oh, we're looking at it, this one. That should follow on with some more blooms. Both leads produced a lot of good new roots on this one. This is one of the best bits of the root system on this. It came out the pot, and it likes to grow in the tray, so I always make sure I leave some water in there to make sure those roots hydrate. But yeah, this one's going to go soon, and then next one to follow on. Good when you get 2 leads, you've got 2 successions, and this is this is little lemon drops crossed with the Cattleyas. Why not? So strange name, but yeah, they're very attractive blooms. They are starting to go now. They deepen in colour as they go, but they lose their I'll call it a sheen. They go like dull watery colours, so that'll be gone soon, followed by the next lot to bloom down the line a bit, because the buds aren't even showing yet, so probably 6 weeks or so before we see those. And these were the 2 that had the experiment done, the cutting the rhizome thing, to see if it actually worked. This is just a no ID hybrid, this one, and the rhizome was cut there on the grounds that that new growth aborted, yeah, and it has shot out behind the cut. So we do have a new lead coming on this one now. Now this one produced this growth last time round, and it didn't bloom. First time ever a new growth hasn't bloomed, but it's pushing up another one over this side now. No swelling in the sheath yet. Nonetheless, a good strong new growth. Yeah, this one has trouble with the leaves. It's always had this mottling effect. But it grows okay. It's just just got some strange marks on it. It's always been like that. I got a feeling it's one of those that likes a lower level of light and it's just getting too much. I might try it on a lower shelf for a bit, see if it'll colour up. The leaves are dark though. It's not like they're a pale wishy-washy colour, but they do have a lot of purple on them. Anyway, we got a strong new growth out one side and a new lead just behind the cut. So we'll see how that one progresses. Just a no ID Cattleya, that one. This is Young Min Orange. This has always been a pretty vigorous plant, and this had the rhizome cut in a couple of places. Consequences are, it's pushed out one there. Yeah, this is the growth here, which pushed out sideways. So this bit here is the latest new growth over this side of the plant, and it's pushed out there behind that cut. And it looks like it may be going to shoot in other places too. Maybe not. You never tell. And then over this side of the plant, we've got again a strong new lead and another one pushed out behind the cut that we made. So I've got my two normal leads in the appropriate place at the front of the plant where you'd expect them to be, and I've now got two more growing. So I've now got 4 leads where I had 2. So on this plant, you know, the result's good. More leads you've got, more chance of blooming. This growth here has already got its sheath. This one's, well, it will produce a sheath, but at the moment it's getting its second leaf going, not to be confused with a sheath. I have known bifoliates push out a third leaf occasionally, but that's a sheath. So yeah, experiment worked on those two to one degree or another. You know, it's difficult to, when you're doing something for the first time, it's difficult to know what to expect. Anything from nothing to something to lots. Well, this one I'd say is okay. You know, going from 2 leads to 4, that's not bad going. And getting a new lead on the other one, not bad either. So coming on, blooms down the line. Now, I've got these two down together because they were one plant. When I repotted it, because it was literally, most of the plant was out the side of the pot. And being a very tall plant, it just wouldn't stand up, so it was just getting silly. So we chopped it in half basically, which meant I had the tatty oldest part of the plant. I mean, this was what it was like when I got it. Probably got a little bit worse on that leaf, but this was the tatty bit that I sort of bought, and it was the back end of the plant. And at the back end of the plant, I've now got 2 leads. It is quite a vigorous one, this one, but 2 leads against something that I didn't even know was going to grow, I'm well pleased with. And the first one of those new leads is now producing some new roots, because this back end of the plant had hardly any viable roots, but even some of the older ones are branching in places, so that's made it with 2 leads. The front end of the plant did exactly what I expected it to do, grew some new roots on this one. That one bloomed, and then it's pushed up this really strong new growth again now. Now this is a bifoliate, but this latest growth only produced 1 leaf. So you could sort of read something into that, actually saying that the fact that the plant was split, it lost its backup to this piece. It only had 2 bulbs. It should have had at least 3 in the background really to make a viable division. So yes, it's pushed up a strong new growth, but it's decided to only push out 1 leaf. But it has got a sheath and what looks like buds in there, but it's not. This one produces a double sheath. It produces a large sheath with a smaller one inside, and it sits like that for quite a while, and then the buds just force their way out the top. Very large spikes on this one. I mean, you can see how thick they are on the old plant, like a, you know, thicker than a cane. But anyway, new roots produced here. New roots will come from this one soon. In fact, they've just started. Yeah, so both pieces are growing, so that's good. From one plant I've now got 2, and this tatty back end can get trimmed off once these 2 have matured and the next 2 grow. Don't go trimming off leaves that still have a bit of function. That doesn't look good, but there's some green on it. It can still probably photosynthesize some. So even though a leaf might not look at its best, as long as it's still got some function in it, I'd leave it. Unless you've got a plant with 30 bulbs and you've got 1 tatty leaf, in which case it can go. But you have to balance your strength of the plant. You know, this plant needs all the leaves it can get because it didn't have enough bulbs to support it. Yeah, but it's managed to do a good new growth. This one's now got 2 new growths. Once they've matured, they may or may not bloom. then it will produce 2 more. At that point it's a strong plant again, and these can come off. But you have to time it, you know, don't go taking too many leaves off and leaving the plant short. It's still got to feed itself. We all worry too much about what goes in this end of the plant. Don't forget what comes in through here. That's just as important. So that's those two. That's Angel Heart, if I didn't say. That's my largest one, and one that's trying to catch up, quite honestly. This is my non-blooming Laelia purpurata variety Atropurpurea. Latest 2 growths are here. They've been deliberately forced to grow in the same direction so that they come up relatively close together, and also that will mean that the next new growths will stay in the pot. That was the idea of that. Some bit of contrivance. I'm still not confident these 2 latest growths are going to bloom, because looking at the way this plant normally progresses, as the leaf pushes on and the bulb matures, the sheath forms, and the sheath on these is large. You know, like half the size of the leaf, you know, very large. And there's no sign of a sheath on these 2 growths, and they're very close to being mature now. Maybe not full size. It's done a hell of a root system this year, which it hasn't had before, inside and outside the pot, including branching out from old parts of the root system. So it's now got a very well established root system. If it doesn't bloom this time, I have mentioned that I might be getting rid of it. I've changed my mind on the grounds that if it's a light issue, which many have said, although I know people that are getting these to bloom that haven't got the light that I've got, and yet they're still doing it. So it could still be southern hemisphere moving to the northern hemisphere, having a bad time in transport, as all Equigenera plants do when they travel halfway around the flipping world, bare rooted for some time. So it could just still be getting itself sorted out, but it's a healthy plant. That's the main thing. Why would you get rid of a healthy plant? No, let's give it another chance. So if these 2 leads don't bloom, then at the signs of the next pair of new growths, whenever that might be, this is going up on the roof where the vandas are. Now that will be its last chance, because I can't give it any more light than that. So your days are numbered if you don't watch your stepmate. Are you listening? This is my Laelia anceps. This headed off in 2 directions a while back, and the latest 2 growths last year, for the first time ever, didn't bloom. And it's reasonably obvious, because I read and chatted to people, that this is a cooler grower. Oh, Laelia anceps doesn't like the heat, they grow cool. So I put it on a lower shelf where it got a little bit of a cool breeze from the inlet fan. Because what I didn't appreciate was it lost its light. As a consequence of going down lower, it was shaded by other plants. I'm sticking to that. I believe that's why those 2 growths didn't actually bloom. But I certainly can't complain about the latest 2 growths, can I? You look at the size of previous ones, and then look at these, and there's a pair of them. I see no reason why this shouldn't bloom now. In a while, because the spikes on this are long, so the leaves they're not even open properly yet, it's still growing. It's going to get even bigger. But once the leaves open fully and the bulbs mature, you know, the spike will probably start not too long after, but they take a long time to grow, because, I mean, on this particular plant, they're not the longest spikes I've seen on anceps, but they're a good 2 foot long before the buds form. So they're very, very long spikes, but I'm pretty sure it will bloom this time round. And as for this one, I'm still on the fence with it. We shall see. Now these 2, this one is just a no ID. This was a split, sort of back end of the plant. It's always looked tatty, this plant. I gave away the best bit. Too kind sometimes. But it was one I knew was going to split, so it went on the to-go list, and then when it came round to the to-go bit, I thought, I can't give somebody that, can I? So I gave away the best bit. But we do have a new growth on there, and it's produced some new roots. A good example of never give up on what look like dead roots. See this root here? I'd have called that dead. It's still firm, but it's branching, yeah? So as it pushes out its new growth, it seems to invigorate old roots. There's even some branching going down on here on really old manky looking roots. So anyway, new growth, may or may not bloom, you know, hasn't too long been divided. Now this is Cattleya leopoldii, and it's not bloomed for me yet, but this latest growth here, which is nice and large and strong, does have a sheath. There is a slight swelling at the base. God, happy sap coming off of that. It's really sticky. But it has produced a sheath, which it hasn't done before. So it's heading towards blooming size now. It was a division that I got, but there's still no telling whether it came from a division that had ever bloomed before, if you see what I mean. But nonetheless, I mean, it grew this new growth for me with no sheath, and now it's grown this one, or it might be just this one it's grown, but at least it's got a sheath. So if it doesn't bloom on this one, it's highly likely to bloom on the next one, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's another gift, I think. I don't believe I bought that one. Anyway, that's those two. Now these are my ever struggling rescue Cattleyas. I think we may be heading towards our third year of trying to get these two pieces to grow. It is the same plant. It's literally only being kept because of the blooms on it. It started off as quite a large plant, got left in its pot far too long and lost its root system. And when I came to repot it, I removed quite a lot of the older parts of the plant, and basically discovered it was heavily infested with fusarium, so it had a bad start in life basically. Did manage to bloom once, and I kept two pieces that showed no signs of life, no growths, no roots, and they just sat there like that for it must be heading up towards a year. I eventually saw some signs of life. I potted them up, and they've progressed at such a slow rate it's hardly worth talking about. This piece over here has no signs of growth apart from that, if you could call that a sign of growth, but it has started to grow some roots. So it has got some root activity, but there's no sign of a decent new growth anywhere on that plant. Yeah, the old leaves just stay, you know, it's not dropping leaves, it just sits there, and it's been doing that a long time. The other piece does have a sign of a new growth, and this one's put on a reasonable amount of root activity, both in the pot and around the pot. And we've got some active growing tips now on the roots. This one failed, but it branched. That's still growing. This one's still growing. It's got one hanging out the pot and some more in the pot with green tips. So there's hope for this one. If that growth can push now, that eye can push and produce a decent bulb with a decent leaf, then this one could recover. But yeah, this has been hard work, and I'm only doing it because of the blooms. Silly really. You know, a plant that just won't grow like that is inherently, there's something wrong, isn't there? You know, I mean, it could be a virus, but it's unlikely. But that it's almost impossible to tell without doing a test, which I'm not doing. You know, why would I pay 20 quid to find out if a plant's got a virus when I probably won't keep it that much longer anyway? There's a limit to my patience, but at the moment they're not in my way. They just sit at the back of a shelf. They get a reasonable amount of light, and we'll see how they do. That tiny little piece on the little piece of cork that I showed earlier with the small mounts, the BC Make, this is the piece it fell off of. This plant, although it may look pretty good to some people, it's not growing possibly as well as it ought to, but it is getting there now, because this is the telltale sign, is this sheer size of this growth. That's what it ought to be doing with the new growths. But some of the ones it's produced are relatively small. So it's getting there. It hasn't got its full vigour yet. It's coming, yeah? So it's coming along. There's another nice large one here. Strictly speaking, it's a bifoliate, but it will produce bulbs with single leaves, like it has here. Well, that one's got a sheath in it, yeah? There's a bifoliate new growth. That's got a sheath in it. I suspect with the number of new growths I've got, there's a smaller one here. See, they're not all large. They're not all pushing up to their full size yet. It's getting its vigour from what wasn't a brilliant root system. It had a root system, it was viable, but there was a lot of dead roots on there that have remained. You know, these are dead roots, but in amongst the base are new roots, and most of them are pushing straight down in the pot, which is where they need to be really. But you can see there's a whole section of plant here moving out from the centre. You've got a little new growth here, one here, that one's not too old, another one here. So this whole section is moving out, yeah, progressing outwards, and as it goes it produces roots. There's quite a few come up in the middle on this one, and there's another section here moving away from the centre, yeah, slowly but surely. And what I'm after is progressive new growths that push up to this size, because that's what they should be, that's where they should be heading. So we will get blooms on this at the appropriate time. It did produce some reasonable blooms last time round. I think there's winter blooming from what I remember, and they lasted absolutely ages, and a magnificent colour changer. Starts off a deep colour and fades to almost white by the time the blooms are finished, but they last ages. So I'm looking forward to the next lot of blooms, and it's coming on. As I said, it hasn't reached its full vigour yet. It still needs a better root system. But with each new growth comes some more roots. It will build its strength up slowly but surely. But it's getting there. Certainly looking a lot better than it did, say, 2 or 3 months ago. So coming on nicely now. And this is the last one. Frog in my throat. This is Pradit spots. There's 4 separate plants in here, 2 young ones and 2 more mature ones, one of which has bloomed once, this one. It's got new growths coming in various places, but they're sort of quite difficult to see. But there are some new growths pushing up in amongst this tangle of leaves and roots. It produces a lot of roots, this one, you know, inside and outside the pot, hanging over the side. There's a big, there's a lovely, nice new growth there, pushing right up into the centre of the flipping plant. There's another one down there. So I do have new growths coming on here. The new growths that come on the 2 younger plants are highly unlikely to bloom, given the size of the more mature plants, one of which still hasn't bloomed yet. So I think these are still progressing up to their blooming size, certainly the 2 younger ones. The 2 more mature ones are probably going to bloom on any new growths they produce from now on. But again, as usual, it's a wait and see. But we did get 1 bloom on here a while back, and it grows. Say a community pot for a change, something a bit different. Last time I picked this up to water it, it was absolutely covered in scale. I actually sprayed it with the systemic, and looking over it now, it looks clean, quite honestly. I can't see any scale on there. So yeah, hopefully it will push on. A scale like that on a large mature Cattleya, the only time you're going to get damage, visible damage, is if they get on the leaves. Yeah, so they will leave marks if they bite. Yeah, so that one, you know, a couple of dead ones on there, so the systemic obviously worked. It's all good. Yeah, but it's coming on. I do expect to see some more blooms on this sometime down the line. But it does need to get some new growths going. It's not going to bloom on anything it's got now. So new growths have got to progress, I would suggest, from the 2 mature plants in here before we see any more blooms. And as they're only just starting in places, it'll be a while. But we should see some blooms down the line. As I say, I was pleased it bloomed once, and hopefully we'll get some more. Seems odd that you know, big mature growths like this didn't bloom. But we'll see what happens with the next set of new growths. They're coming on, you know, so we'll see how it goes. So that's the Cattleya update. For those of you who've stuck with this, you get a bit on the end. For those of you who skipped out early, won't hear this bit. Tomorrow, my Sunday morning chat, I'm going to set the tripod up and be out here in the grow room. Hang on. I don't want a wet pair of legs here. Yeah, so what I'm going to do tomorrow is set the tripod up and get out here. And anybody that's heard this bit, if you've got any plants you'd like a closer look at, or plants you haven't seen for a while, or anything you'd like me to talk in a bit more detail, stick it in the comments on this video so that it's all ready for tomorrow morning when I get out here. I've got some plants that I want to show anyway, so you know, if I don't get any comments at all, that's fine. But anybody who's stuck to the end, who hears this, who'd like to see a particular plant and how it's doing, we'll get at that tomorrow. So those Sunday morning chats when I'm out here, they're like a live broadcast, except for it's non-interactive. But like a live broadcast, I'm in it, I'll pick up plants, bring them close up to the camera and everything and chat about them. So any requests for particular plants, put them in on this video in the comments section, and I'll see what I can do tomorrow. And providing I don't get another bout of illness knocking me down, which is unlikely, then I will see you tomorrow for the Sunday morning chat. Bye for now.